You ever have a year full of plans only to run into an even bigger list of obstacles? 2022 was that year for me. It was a year no man should have to face alone. Luckily, I didn't face it alone. I had my then fiance and now wife. I had my friends and family. And of course, I had the games that helped me avoid spiraling into crippling depression. Looking back on the year that was, I couldn't help but notice an underlying theme behind all my experiences. So grab some tea, sit back, and let me tell you about resilience. Kicking off 2022, there was only one thing on my mind. My wedding. Being the planner that I am, and with only a few months till the big day, my brain was in overdrive. People being in the right place at the right time, everyone knowing what they're meant to be doing, making sure all the vendors were accounted for. It was, after all, going to be the most important day of my life. Rather than succumb to all the pressure, I did what any healthy gamer would do. I went up to my fiance and said, "Objection!" Just kidding. While I didn't object to my duties as soon-to-be husband, I did decide to play as a clueless Japanese student who was suddenly thrust into the position of a lawyer trying to defend himself from a crime he didn't commit. Coincidentally, it was a pretty relatable position. Thankfully not because I'd been framed for murder, but because I was about to be thrust into a role I was entirely unfamiliar with and was feeling incredibly unqualified for. The game that I'm referring to though is The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. It's a game for those that enjoy reading. Lots and lots of reading. And for those that enjoy fries. Okay, it's honestly more fun than I'm making it sound. The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles are part of a series of visual novels where you play as a lawyer, investigating crimes, and doing your best to defend your clients in court by finding contradictions in the testimonies of the many colorful witnesses that are featured throughout the game. You get sucked into the anticipation of how each case will unfold, and how each character will reveal more and more of their true selves, whether it's simply through their lies being unmasked, or through a character opening up over time. But it's the story of the protagonist, Ryunosuke Naruhodo, where the most profound change happens. He starts off being lost, unsure of himself, and panicked in the face of hostility. I mean, you would too if you had to defend yourself in court with literally zero experience. But by the end of the game, while still unsure of himself at times, he's resolved to pursue the truth, no matter what adversity stands in front of him. And with me as a soon-to-be husband, with no experience in that field either, that key lesson from the Great Ace Attorney would stick with me throughout the year to come. That lesson being resilience through faith in oneself. I got married. 3 words that I never really expected to be saying at this point in my life, or ever, but I'm grateful. Grateful for my wife, grateful for the friends and family that made the occasion so special, grateful for an absolutely perfect day. The day after, however, was far from perfect. You see, our wedding happened right when the Omicron variant of COVID-19 was just taking off. And unfortunately, the statistics were not on our side. We found out the day after our wedding that one of our guests tested positive. This meant that instead of sending out photos and thank you messages, my wife and I were messaging everyone that they might have been exposed to COVID. Instead of a fancy dinner and then frolicking on the beach, we had to isolate for a week. While it's never a bad thing to be spending alone time with my wife, we felt a certain sense of being trapped. A sense of feeling helpless in the circumstances. I needed that sense of freedom and peace that the pandemic was robbing so many people of. So I played A Short Hike. If you've ever traveled to a quiet place where the only sounds you hear are the rustling of leaves in the trees and the gentle lapping of waves on the beach, well, that's what this game is. It's a wonderful little game where you play as a Flappy Bird who needs a hike to the peak of this island to get phone reception. A totally relatable concept. And just like a hike in real life, you'll find all sorts of things along the way. Fun little distractions. Someone else's loose change. Spots to just sit back and enjoy the view. And little shits that ruin it for everyone else. The best part was that playing it gave me a sense of calm and freedom. The sense of calm coming from the simple and beautiful soundtrack and the charming pixel art that took me back to simpler times. And the sense of freedom coming from playing as a bird. Because, come on, flying in games is always fun. It's the serenity of the entire experience that gets you to overcome challenges and obstacles without feeling like there are any. Before you know it, you've reached the top. Before you know it, you're flying. It's resilience through calm. Then we caught COVID, which is unlucky since my wife and I are both introverted homebodies. But do you know what's worse than catching COVID? Catching it twice. But do you know what's even worse than catching COVID twice? Catching it right before moving houses. Having heard one too many stories about people getting long COVID, I was pretty paranoid about getting it myself. So rest was the name of the game, but with house moving day fast approaching, I was about to find out if I had recovered enough. Thankfully, I had. I was running up and down stairs, I was lifting heavy. The move went as smoothly as we could have liked. But you know what didn't go smoothly? Beating this boss in 9 Parchments. 9 Parchments is a top-down cooperative action game where you play as wizards. You have an ever-growing array of spells that you can use to slay enemies and heal allies, or slay allies and heal enemies. It is literally a blast playing with friends, and a great introduction for my then girlfriend into the top-down action genre. You see, getting to the final boss was several months in the making. Like our relationship, our ability to work together and overcome these challenges grew over time. It was awesome watching my wife's journey as a gamer too. From dying a bunch and not being able to keep track of where she is, to still dying a bunch, but definitely taking more than a few down with her, including me at times. Playing through this game reminded me of how far we'd come as a couple. And as cliche as it sounds, it reminded me that my wife and I could take on the world together. Or at least a couple of jumpy boys. Resilience through teamwork. But COVID wouldn't be the last health-related challenge we would have to deal with. Later in the year, my wife was scheduled for a minor surgery that would improve her quality of life. Little did we know that the road to recovery would be some of the toughest months. Imagine your life was a JRPG with random encounters. Now imagine that randomly at any point during a day, an invisible enemy shows up, inflicts you with severe pain, and escapes before you can do anything about it. Well, that's basically what my wife had to go through for months, and it was hell. The worst part is that we were powerless to do anything about it. The only reassurance the doctor could give us was that it would get better over time. And it was at about this time I found myself playing Katana Zero, a beautifully animated 2D action game. Katana Zero has you play as a badass mercenary samurai, taking on waves upon waves of heavily armed enemies with your trusty katana. Now, conventional wisdom would tell you swords lose to guns, but what they really lose to are these freaking shields! This game makes you feel like a badass. Slay enemies with a single slash of your blade. Slay enemies with a single slash of your blade. Dodge enemy attacks, deflect bullets, dance like an absolute boss, and if you come across seemingly impossible odds, you can simply slow time. Getting through these stages gave me a sense of power and control over the toughest of circumstances, something I had the exact opposite of IRL. The thing that I could do though, just like I was doing in Katana Zero, was keep on trying, getting up every day, giving the day my all, being there for my wife, and never giving up the hope for the day that she'll be pain-free. Resilience through perseverance. While I did play a bunch of other games in 2022, these were the ones that resonated with me the most through a year that was filled with challenges. Are there games that resonated with you during a particular time of your life? Keen to hear your thoughts in the comments. You are an absolute legend for making it all the way to the end of this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.